Hello, God's people. My name is Pastor Destiny Wilson of the Anchor Woman. I want to talk to you about God's promises and His fulfillment. I know a lot of us have had promises, maybe through reading the Bible, or those promises or prophecies came through a prophet or a pastor, and we are holding on to these promises or these prophecies, and sometimes it can look like it's taking forever for this promise to come through. But let's look at the Bible and people who God promised, and it took a heck of a long time for these promises to come to pass, but it's never going to go unfulfilled. One thing I know about the God we serve is that when He promised, He keeps up His promises. He is a promise keeper. Let's look at the life of Abraham. God promised Abraham a son at the age of 75. Now, the promise of a son is just the beginning of the promises and the things that God was to do in his life. He promised Abraham to give him a son at the age of 75, and Abraham was 100 years old when this promise was fulfilled. This took about 25 years for this promise of a son to come to pass. And we know, I'm very sure that Abraham had his own share of frustrations, everything that happened during the 25 years. He even had a son with his wife's maid. And these things happen to us while we're waiting. We could make mistakes. And I want to assure you that during the time of your wait, sometimes God makes us wait for the things He has promised us to test our faith, to test the level of our faith. I mean, look at the life of Abraham. God promised to give him a son. The son came 25 years later, but God still kept His promise. God promised to make Abraham the father of nations, and He said his descendants will be like the sand of the dust of the earth. And whoever can count the dust of the earth will be able to count the descendants. And we all know that you can't count the dust of the earth. Now, this promise didn't come to pass in the time of Abraham. I'm sure we all remember. This promise didn't come to pass in the time of Isaac. But the promises God made to Abraham came to pass in the time of his grandson, Jacob, who gave birth to the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, if you look at the life of Abraham and the time it took God to bring His promises to pass, mind you, God brought His promises to pass. It took about 600 years for God to fulfill every single promise that He made to Abraham. Now, I'm not saying you're going to wait for 600 years for God to bring His promises to pass in your life. I'm not saying that He's not going to bring His promises to pass in your lifetime, or maybe He's going to bring it to pass in the life and the time of your grandchildren or great-grandchildren. That is not what I'm talking about. But I'm telling you that when God makes a promise, His promises does not go unfulfilled. He will keep His promise. He will make His promise up to you. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. This is where the waiting comes in. Now, there are things God will bring your way. There are things God will allow to happen in your life when He makes a promise to you. Number one of these things, I'm just going to share with you about 4 of them. Number one of these things God is going to make happen in your life, He will allow trials to come test your faith during the time of your wait. Now, we see this in the life of so many people in the Bible. We even see this in our own life. Things happen. Look at the life of Job. Things happened to him. This whole process was testing his faith. But Job he never turned his back against God, no matter what happened to him. And number 2 of what will happen when God promised you something, He will give you the gift of fortitude to overcome every pain and trial that will come your way. You know, for a long time, I realized that I just have a way of going through pains and I don't break. I realized that things happen to me, and on a normal day, there are so many people these things will happen to, and they might not be able to take it. Some people will be like, oh, Destiny, if I were to be in your shoe, I would have committed suicide already. But the truth is, I never knew fortitude was a gift of the Holy Spirit. Now, sometimes I'm amazed at myself. And then when people ask me this question, how do you do it? I tell them, I don't know. That is the question. That's the answer I give them. I don't know how it happens. until I started studying the Bible, until I started spending time with God. And then I realized that one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit is the gift of fortitude. Now, the meaning of fortitude is courage during the time of pains and adversities. When God promised you something, it doesn't mean you're not going to go through pain. I mean, Abraham had his own share of pains. Abraham had his own share of frustrations, but God gave him the gift of fortitude. He overcame at the end of the day. Now, God will give you the gift of fortitude in this period of your wait, and you will be surprised that you will come out polished and nothing will be broken in your life. Number 3 thing that will happen in your life when God promised you, He will prepare you towards the promise, and He will prepare you towards that blessing. And when it comes, this blessing will humble you. You know, a lot of people, the reason God don't bring some things to pass at the time they feel it should come, there are so many blessings that God will give to us and it will make our head swell. There's so many blessings God will allow come at the time you want it to come, and probably at that time you might not be able to handle that promise. There is a reason God make us wait. There is a reason God delay in fulfilling His promises. He's teaching us how to handle these things when the blessing comes. Probably if He gave it to you at that time when you ask Him, probably you will be so proud and you will lose it. Don't forget pride cometh before a fall. And when He gives you at that time when you need it, it might not finish up well. So there is a reason God makes you wait. And number 4, which is the last I'm going to talk about, is that He will keep you intact no matter the trials. When I mean God will keep you intact no matter the trials, I will look at the life of Job again. When everything happened to Job, the sicknesses, the loss, he lost his children, he lost his business, he lost everything he had. But God kept his heart intact. Everything that Job had in his body, God kept it intact. His heart was intact. His life was intact. When God restored to him, I believe you've read the story of Job, He restored to him in a way that he could not believe it, in 100-fold. His skin became like that of a baby. Everything God gave him, He gave him more than what he bargained for. This is what the Lord will do for you when He makes you a promise. He keeps you intact. Trials may come. Trials will go. Everything that God brings your way, sometimes the things we go through may not necessarily be because we've committed a sin against God. Sometimes God can allow you suffer innocently. When I mean innocently, you can suffer innocently. God will just be looking at you. You are not suffering because God hates you. God can promise to make you rich tomorrow and you will sow Gary today. You will suffer. But when that promise comes to pass, you will be glad you waited. I mean, look at the life of Job. I keep referring to the life of Job. Everything comes to pass in due time. Everything God promises you come to pass. There is nothing that goes unfulfilled. As long as it has come out of the mouth of God, as long as it has proceeded from the mouth of God, it will not come back unfulfilled. Hold on to God's promises. He will bring it to pass in due time. Be blessed.